80 of Grace and Steel. I'm Kevin Steele.
And I'm Kevin Michael Grace.
Episode 80 of Grace and Steel is sponsored by Pepe Reads, an alt-right patriotic book club that will meet monthly in downtown Vancouver. Those interested in taking part are invited to contact the organizer at pepereads@protonmail.com. For this show, we're marching under the banner, Taking Back the Town Square. The topic is free speech and the right to free assembly. The news pegs for this are numerous and accumulate almost daily, going back to base stickmen in the Second Battle of Berkeley, the cancellation of Ann Coulter's talk at the same location, the closing down of the Rose Parade in Portland due to Antifa's threatening GOP participants, etc., etc. Behind each is either violence or the threat of violence from the left in order to silence the right. All kinds of countermeasures are being proposed, and we'll discuss some of those. But first of all, let's describe what's at stake. Kevin, what will be the result if the right to free assembly is not taken back in the United States?
Well, what happens is the United States becomes Canada. I'm sorry to go back to that well one more time. But
Come join us.
Yes, but it's absolutely
the water's
true.
fine.
Let's see who's been banned from speaking, prevented, physically from speaking in Canada. We've had Benjamin Netanyahu.
That was the example. You stole my thunder. I was going to go back to that.
Yeah, we've had Jared Taylor. Mm-hmm. We've had Ann Coulter.
Right.
When this Rouge 5 fellow came to Canada.
Yeah. They chased him all over Montreal or something like that.
Well, no, you had, the mayors of Ottawa and Calgary and Toronto and Brian Bowman, whoever he's the mayor of, Winnipeg. No place for intolerance. No. The mayor of Vancouver. No place. No platform. No platform for bad ideas.
Yeah. The mayors of Canada. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, no, they all piled on because, of course, we don't believe in free speech or free assembly in this country. It's an American idea, remember?
Yes, that was a quote, actually, from a guy that worked in the Canadian Human Rights Commission.
That's right.
Testimony said
That's right.
Yeah.
Long-time employee of the Canadian Human Rights Commission said that free speech is an American concept. It would appear that freedom of assembly is an American concept as well, even though it is enumerated as 2C in our Charter of Rights.
Oh, yeah, but that doesn't really apply,
Also freedom of association, but we won't get into that whole business because the freedom of association means the freedom not to associate. And, well, that is very, very, that's just like the worst thing in Canada, not wanting to associate with certain people. But I will point out that worse than these various people that I mentioned being, and others being prevented from speaking, is that like the suppression of free speech in Canada, the suppression of free assembly in Canada has led to a situation where it becomes internalized. That is to say, you see fewer and fewer of these examples in Canada because no one bothers anymore. Mm-hmm. You see what I'm getting at?
Yeah. That was the deterrence that they were trying to stress by these laws, right?
There's no point everyone in Canada knows that if you're going to bring in a, quote, controversial, unquote, speaker, it's more than your job's worth. Because your life will be made a misery and you'll be, threatened with assault or maybe actually assaulted while the police stand around doing nothing.
Yes, well, at least the Americans, they've got that right. Their police know how to stand around doing nothing. But
now,
sorry, go ahead. Now.
No, well, I was going to say that
sorry.
We have the situation in Canada such that we've mentioned this on the air, I believe, previously, where some alt-righters have put up posters asking questions about immigration and Chinese takeover of condo committees, that sort of thing.
Right, yeah, that was Vancouver, and then there were some in Edmonton and some in Calgary.
Yes, this was...
I think some in Ontario too, not many, but...
The reaction to this was as if sarin had been released into the atmosphere.
Yeah, why are you disturbing our peaceful lives?
The police put on their hazmat suits and removed all of these posters because apparently one is not allowed to ask questions about immigration, affirmative action, and Chinese takeover in British Columbia. Now, I'm reading from a government document here how your rights are protected. This is from the Government of Canada. Oh, and our rights are protected by the Canadian Bill of Rights, the Canadian Human Rights Act, the Constitution of Canada, and the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. All right?
Mm-hmm.
Sounds pretty good. I mean, we're just covered up and down and sideways.
Up the yin-yang with protection here, yeah.
Yeah. But not that simple. It's not that simple. The Charter also recognizes that even in a democracy, rights and freedoms are not absolute. For instance, freedom of expression is guaranteed, but no one is free to yell fire in a crowded theater or to spread hate propaganda.
Mm-hmm. Right, yeah, there you go. The second one is like, oh, I see. There seems to be a bit of a judgment call in that now. Yelling fire in a theater, that's pretty straightforward. However, this whole hate speech, how do you define that? And that's what it comes down to. I've noticed in the coverage of the pegs that led to us talking about this, which was the Berkeley thing, a lot of the lefties now they're going through all these convoluted arguments about how the protesters that are shutting down free speech are actually trying to protect free speech for the people who really need it. I saw an article in the Maclean's about this, like this. There's an article there, I think, from yesterday.
From Maclean's, and what was the position of Maclean's?
I don't know about Maclean's, but the writer, her position was that this is not free speech. The alt-right and the far-right have co-opted the whole free speech issue in order to push their nefarious agenda. So that's the main argument here. Let's see if I can find something on that. Yeah, it was like Eleni Picasso. Who that is? I don't know how to say her name anyway. She looks like a person. I tried to do a little research into her, and I found somebody that with the same name that has an eating disorder, and that's about as far as I got.
How the alt-right weaponized free speech.
Free speech, yeah. The fight for free speech is a worthy one, she writes, but the alt-right's co-opting of the movement exposes their unsavory motives. Now, that's exactly the same thing somebody wrote in the New York Times, I think on the 24th, this Ehrlich Bayer. He was going through this convoluted argument as well, that...
the Z blogger had an essay about him a couple of days ago.
Oh, is that right? Okay, I didn't.
Well, no, the argument being that trauma trumps reason or any kind of argument.
Mm-hmm.
If people are going to be hurt, well, then we can't have it. This is the harm-based society that Pleasure Man at NBC talks about.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Now, I wanted to go back to this government document that I quoted from.
Mm-hmm.
It continues, therefore, federal or a provincial legislature can limit fundamental rights, but only if that government can show that the limit is reasonable, is prescribed by law, and can be justified in a free and democratic society. The interests of society must be balanced against the interests of individuals to see if limits on individual rights can be justified. Americans, pay attention to this. You might want to even memorize this. This is the means by which freedom has largely been eliminated in Canada, justified in a free and democratic society. And the Canadian Supreme Court has held, again and again, that, we can limit free speech, we can limit whatever we want, we can empty out the so-called Charter of Rights if it hurts people's feelings. And in the Taylor case, which is the Supreme Court decision which ended free speech in Canada not that long ago, 1990, I believe.
Yeah, that's a long time ago.
Oh, okay. Well, truth is not a defense.
Yeah.
Got that? Truth is not a defense. Now, this is, if Hillary Clinton had won the presidential election, this is what the American government would be moving forward on quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And they would take this up to the Supreme Court, and they'd fill the Supreme Court with their justices, and they would get the rulings to justify the position taken in the Canadian government position, as expressed in the paragraph that I read. But, I mean, the movement is happening on the ground in the United States.
Yeah, that's interesting because it can be challenged on the ground, and that's what the whole second battle of Berkeley was all about.
Well, I wanted to, before we get into that, I wanted to read from a February 3rd essay by the blogger known as Aquino Cure at the website Face to Face. He writes, "It's necessary to understand what this phenomenon is and what it is not. To begin with, it is not about free speech, which is a right to convey statements to an audience, whether the statements are informational or opinion-based. Speech is about communication and typically the media through which people communicate. The speakers who have their events shut down can and do convey their beliefs and opinions through communications media, reaching larger audiences than they can with a real-life, face-to-face talk. It's not even about a broader thing called free expression, although that gets a bit closer. Expression includes things beyond statements, such as wearing clothing that identifies you as a member of Group A rather than Group B. Rather, the target of the rioters is the right to free assembly. Form a gauntlet outside of the meeting place, set a car on fire on the way to the meeting place, detonate a bomb inside of the meeting place, and most people will shy away from attending such a meeting. Note that the attendees are not a random sample of the population, but those who already largely agree and identify with the speaker. Unlike free speech, where a diverse and curious audience may be giving the statements a hearing, free assembly is meant to strengthen the existing social, cultural, and emotional bonds of a group."
Yeah, well, that's why I was complaining about you stealing my thunder with Netanyahu, because that was the template right there. That was back in, I actually wrote down the date here, September 9th, 2002, when they caused a riot that shut down the meeting.
This was at Concordia University in Montreal, and Concordia University has been notorious for pause, going back to the 1960s when it was called something other than Concordia University.
Mm-hmm, yeah, but I mean, it's the template was there. They managed to shut it down by causing such a violent stir in front of the place where he was to speak that he never even left his hotel. He stayed there the whole time. And that seems to have been what they have, deemed a success and followed the model of that, right?
Well, it becomes a question of safety.
Assembly.
It becomes a question of safety.
Yeah.
That's the excuse that the police use, or university authorities, or civic authorities. Now, you have people engaged in a conspiracy against other people. Now, we're not going to bother with that. We're just faced with the issue of safety. And so we are going to shut down this event.
Yeah, and now they're running articles like this one from the East Bay Times, "The Price of Free Speech. Alameda County Sheriff hits up UC for policing costs." So you see these evil right-wingers, they're running up the costs. Now, it's not the Antifas that are showing up to cause the violence. It's these people that, want to exert their right to free speech. They should have to pay. But that's an aside issue. They're going at it from all directions here, I suppose.
Well, of course, this can be applied from the other direction. If they really want to play that game, it's not all that difficult to apply the same tactics to left-wing events.
Yeah. Do they have events? Because maybe that's what... Yeah, I was going to say, okay, so what's the solution? Do the alt-righters show up at their events and try to shut them down? Or do they just keep going? I mean, I actually don't see it as dire. I see them as weakening on this. The fact that they've got all these bogus arguments in the New York Times and in Maclean's magazine in Canada, that are so weak and so empty, that can only appeal to, people that are already convinced on the other side, that, I see this as a weakening of their position.
Yes, aren't you
making
that mistake about rhetoric?
Okay, touche.
No, I mean, you
Grace.
think that they're weak arguments. I think that they're weak arguments. If these are the arguments that people, normies, hear again and again and again, well, it's the only argument, isn't it? And, a bunch of radicals are speaking out against the mainstream. See, this is how it works. That a bunch of people, let's say a bunch of weirdos, for argument's sake, want to get together and talk about their weird stuff. Okay, that's not a problem, is it? I mean, that's the American tradition, isn't it?
Yeah.
But we're going to flip reality on its head. And these people are so dangerous that, no, we can't allow this to happen. And you don't want to be on the wrong side of this argument, do you?
Right.
I mean, are you racist, sexist, homophobic, transphobic? Xenophobic, etc. No.
Fascist Nazis.
I am not any of those things. Well, if you're not any of those things, you have to get on board with what freedom really is. And freedom is the freedom to say the right things, not the wrong things.
Yeah. This is the moving of the goalposts, as Ron Hart in the Daily Caller calls it in his article on this. And I was reading the Ron Hart piece in the Daily Caller, May 2nd, Free Speech Suffocated on Campus, The Silence of the Lambs. I was thinking, maybe this is an opportunity for the nerds, for the armchair quarterbacks, what would you call them, the conservative class, who, like to argue this stuff. Maybe this is their chance to step forward and start arguing free speech. But then I read a piece by a guy named Stanley Kurtz in the National Review's The Corner about some Republican Californian proposing a campus free speech act. And he seemed to think this was a great thing because it was kind of based on something that he had written earlier about a free speech act that they wanted passed all over the place. And it's just so nerdy. I mean, I'm reading this and I'm thinking, well, where were you when they voted against gay marriage in California? Because it doesn't matter what laws you have. First of all, the courts can override them, and we already have laws for free speech. It's in the bloody Constitution, isn't it?
Well, it is. It is. I'm looking at this article from a couple of months ago. Last week, former House of Commons Speaker Andrew Scheer hit what might be a home run with the suggestion that if academia expects to be publicly funded, it had better start reflecting and defending democratic values such as free speech. Under Scheer's proposed policy, Scheer is running for the leadership of the Conservative Party. The decision will be made on that later this month. Public colleges and universities would be required to provide a written commitment to advancing and protecting free speech when applying for grant applications from federally funded organizations. It's an idea that not only makes sense, it is positively refreshing to hear. That's from a Sun Media article. Now, of course, you see, hang on a second here. Cut this out. I got to shift in my chair, and I got a new chair here that squeaks. I'm going to have to deal with that.
Okay.
Eventually, I can't do that right now.
Hi, folks. This is co-host and podcast editor Kevin Steele breaking in here post-production just to add a little footnote. A few of you donors and listeners have written to us asking whether Kevin Grace managed to get a new chair to replace the really noisy one he sat in low this past year of the podcast. The answer is yes. However, he has not explained to me where this chair came from, or why he hasn't oiled it yet. I might as well take this moment to thank our generous donors because I have yet to send out my thank you emails dating back to Christmas, so I'll get around to that soon. So, thank you, and on with the show.
You see, the problem with the Scheer's policies, one of the problems with it is, we're going to bribe universities to do what they should be doing in the first place. Is that the universities can claim safety issue.
Sure. Yeah, safety first. That's the issue that they'll hide behind. That's secondary. They go cause the disturbance and then force the universities into a high-cost situation. where they really can't allow the speech because they can't afford the protection. Yeah,
I mean, there's this question of provocation is brought up. I believe it's brought up in that Maclean's article and elsewhere. Now, it could be argued, reasonably enough, that given that Concordia is a hotbed, and I use that word advisedly, of anti-Israeli and anti-Jewish sentiment in Canada, that Netanyahu was guilty of a provocation. He could have gone to McGill to speak. He could have gone to many places in Montreal where he would not met such a reaction to... and my reaction to this is, so what? So what that it's a provocation? This idea that the Prime Minister of Israel, I believe he was out of office at the time, he can't come to a Canadian university and speak. The whole idea is outrageous. Oh, feelings are running very high here in favor of the Palestinians. So what? Really?
Yeah. Seems to be the place to go speak then.
Oh, and this argument that, oh, well, Ann Coulter and Milo going to Berkeley. Oh, the free speech issue. Mario Savio. Oh, this is a provocation. Well, yeah, Mario Savio was a leftist. Yeah. And so Milo and Ann Coulter are not leftists. So what? Honestly.
Okay,
if you want this argument of a provocation, it's not that difficult to push this provocation line such that any behavior, actions, or thoughts which you don't like can be considered provocations.
Sure, yeah, that's the snowflake position, really, is that's where we end up with no speech. But, I mean, how do you counter the safety argument or the provocation argument? You just say, okay, we're just going to keep going. Let's go back to Berkeley again, one more time. This time with more support.
More support? Well,
Is that the solution? Do it again?
Well, who was it that invited Ann Coulter to Berkeley?
Actually, I don't know the circumstances, so.
Well, it was Young Americans for Freedom.
Oh, yeah, those guys. Yeah, they wimped out. Yeah, okay.
Which is the old Buckleyite organization.
And they buckled.
And they buckled, indeed. Very nice. Very good, Kevin. Hey. Yes, the Buckleyites buckled, as they always do.
All right.
No,
yes.
I want to mention something else in this regard, that we saw Donald Trump supporters beaten regularly during the election campaign last year. Mm-hmm. We saw these attacks on people going to his rallies. We saw these attempts to prevent his rallies. While, again, the police, secured the perimeter?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah, I mean, there was an overwhelming numbers as well. And also some of the Democrats' tactics were exposed as well in those O'Keefe videos. So that took the wind out of the sails there for them. So I don't know whether infiltrating the Antifas is an option here as well. Just basically expose their funding, expose their tactics, whether that would work. I'm not sure. I mean, the only solution I see, like I say, is just go do it again and again and again.
Well, there's the argument made by Samuel Johnson, which is, quote, every man has a right to utter what he thinks truth, and every other man has a right to knock him down for it. Martyrdom is the test, unquote. And it would seem that we are getting close to the martyrdom level in the United States. Difference between the United States and Canada is that Canadians have decided that they really don't need free speech and free expression.
Yeah.
I mean, this is
why
I'm being somewhat hyperbolic here, but it's not an issue that exercises most Canadians. Even you see this with Maclean's magazine, that some person with a foreign name shows up to lecture Canadians, and the message is clear.
Right.
You don't want to be on the wrong side of this. You really don't. Because we'll destroy you. Okay, it just, we won't throw you in jail. Not yet. But we'll just make it so that you can't earn a living.
Yeah, but, I mean, if we were really concerned about that, we'd just get lots of people to challenge them so that they had to run around, Well, and that's I'm kind of hoping these, unemployed youngsters will, will challenge it.
The NEETs? You're looking forward to the NEET army rising up?
Sure, why not? You want to go to jail? Nah, let them go to jail. Sorry, just kidding.
Well, this woman, Ahali Picasso, is described on her Twitter page. Oh, there she is, another person posing with a dog.
Oh, that is her, eh? Is that the same person? Because that's the person that has they got a GoFundMe page where they've raised $54,000 for, I don't know, dental surgery or something like this.
Well,
there's also some discussion about eating disorders.
This is the woman because she is linking to the Maclean's article.
Oh, okay.
She describes herself as an athlete, a writer, a politico, and a researcher.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Now, the reason I brought up the incidents at the Trump rallies was that one could see in this an attempt by the authorities to prevent Trump from being elected by browbeating his supporters.
You're talking about by using the Antifas or the people that were causing the trouble at the riots?
That's right.
Yeah, okay.
Well, I mean, George Soros was involved in this, was he not?
Mm-hmm, yeah. And that actually, isn't that actually criminal or something like that? No, I guess not. Obviously, intimidating somebody during an election with violence is not a crime.
Well, one would think so.
Mm-mm.
One would think so, but you see the police all over the United States basically sitting on their hands and Trump depending upon his own security. Now, I think that this is probably the best way to go, depending on your own security. Of course, there's a problem there because it leads to situations like Altamont.
Yeah.
Well, we have these guys here. They'll provide security, and they don't even need to be paid. All they want is some beer. And, the right to crack pool cues over people's heads and to...
with fatal results, yeah.
Yeah, and, just to go nuts.
Yeah, well, that's kind of what a lot of people are advocating when they talk about the Kyle Chapman type defense. He was the based stick man. I guess he's organizing something or other. I'm not sure about that. I read somewhere that he's organizing some force. Somebody reported on it from the left that these crazy alt-righters are now organizing a defense force. I don't know. Sounds like a good idea to me, but anyways.
Well, no, one has to assume...
it's getting physical, so...
Well, it is getting physical, and, we've heard talk about Weimar.
Right, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Now, I know that, I'll mention the Z-Blogger again, he poured scorn on this notion, and what you had in Weimar, Germany, was you had large armed groups of Nazis fighting with communists on the streets. Okay. We're not there yet, but there's no question that the elite is determined to destroy free speech and free assembly. And what will it take to gain these back? Well, I mean, I suspect that one way to get this back, or an attempt to get this back, is just to sue the hell out of everybody. I mean, when I...
Lawyer up? What?
Yes, the American lawfare, they call it.
Mm-hmm.
The left uses lawfare extensively, and I see no reason why the right shouldn't use it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this idea that American Renaissance or VDARE, they can't hold conferences, that has to be kept secret, and then they're canceled at the last minute. Oh, they get a few phone calls, or maybe one phone call, and then it becomes a safety issue.
Right, yeah.
Right?
Okay.
I mean, we had this situation in Portland, where the Rose Parade was canceled because of one anonymous email.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
yeah.
I mean, on that basis, then it would be pretty easy to bring the whole of society to a halt, wouldn't it?
Well, you have to have, I guess, feckless and cowardly civic leaders, which I think goes without saying anyway.
Feckless and cowardly? Well, we've gone beyond feckless and cowardly in Canada to the point where I mentioned these Canadian mayors, that they are fighting each other to prove who is the most anti-free speech and free assembly.
Yes, I know. But I thought we agreed not to talk about Canada, Kevin.
No, going back to this that if you want, there is a back and forth between Canada and the United States, but American leftists, they look to Canada because Canada it's a corrupt oligarchy, all right? It's a corrupt oligarchy, and the people who get things done, the globalists and all the people associated with them, they don't really have to worry about things like elections because everyone's on the same side.
Right, yeah.
Everyone is on the same side.
Yeah, they pour a lot of money into Canada, actually. American NGOs and through the various funding agencies.
If America were more like Canada, then the globalists could breathe easy because there would be nothing standing in their way. Mm-hmm. And this situation which has arisen with Trump, with ordinary people expressing opposition to the regime, and ordinary people in significant numbers, is terrifying to the elite. Now,
why would it be terrifying to them? They control everything. They have the courts. They just, obviously they can buy judges. Here's Obama's judge. He pops up, out of nowhere to block the immigration orders, I mean, why would they be worried?
Why would they be worried?
Mm-hmm.
Well, because of the fear that if these people are not shouted down, they may make more converts.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
That's one fear.
All right.
They have this illusion of omnipotence. And to the extent that they don't get what they want, this illusion dissipates.
Okay. All right. So they have, I guess, a need for the status quo to be maintained. But are we really threatening it? Is Ann Coulter threatening the status quo by giving a speech at Berkeley?
Well, Ann Coulter, she is threatening the status quo. I mean, you remember when Pat Buchanan was run out of MSNBC.
Mm-hmm.
The idea was, we're up to they'd reached the mopping up stage there, right?
Right, yeah.
That Buchanan was known to be a serious opposition of elite hegemony. He wasn't one of those nice right-wingers, the ones that National Review say, or the Weekly Standard. And so he was run out of MSNBC, and just to, pour a little poison into that wound, they brought in Al Sharpton to replace him. Al Sharpton, the fellow who fomented an honest-to-God pogrom in New York City.
Right.
But, so you see, Ann Coulter, I suppose she was supposed to have gone away after 9/11 when she said some, made some strong statements, said some outrageous things. But she has persevered, and she thrives. And again, I would say that the monoculture depends on being mono.
Mm-hmm.
That you cannot allow alternatives to exist because of the likelihood that people are going to choose an available alternative in the same way that, some people choose Pepsi over Coke. Or to give her a better example, that some people actually drink Dr. Pepper,
Right, okay. So you think that, is she the thin edge of the wedge? I mean, what is their purpose here? We can't.
Well, she is the thin end of the wedge because we know that her book Adios America was a big influence on Donald Trump and his immigration policy.
Well, aren't they a bit late though? That's all I'm saying here. That she's already out of the gate with that. She doesn't represent the thin edge of the wedge anymore. The wedge is firmly in place. So what do they hope to gain by rolling it back?
What do they hope to get? Well, they're rolling it back.
Okay.
A fluke occurred in November 2016. Blame Hillary Clinton, blame a whole bunch of other things. But this guy, the wrong guy, was elected president. Now, the first thing that we have to do is to make sure that he cannot accomplish any of the things that he promised. And they've been pretty successful in that. Despite the fact that the Republicans control both houses of Congress and the presidency. But I read in the New York Times that, they just can't They can't get the budget they want. Why not? Oh, well, because the Republicans, the cucks, are playing along with the Democrats, with Charles Schumer. And that's step one, to frustrate Trump in his every desire. Step two is to make sure that the conditions for Trump's election never happen again. And there's all sorts of ways to do that, to stop people from speaking in public. Shutting down the internet as a bastion of free speech. That's another way to do it.
So will the Republicans do that? I mean, here's the thing. If they go too far, then they risk a stronger reaction. That's the problem. That's always the problem. That's the way. Going back to Burnham's, the Machiavellians, right? That's what, Pareto said? If they go too far, the rebellion starts, right? They create the conditions for their own overthrow.
Yeah, they can create the conditions for their own overthrow. We're talking about desperate situations when we're talking about an actual overthrow. The whole point of the democratic system is that it's supposed to prevent such desperate systems, such desperate circumstances from coming to pass. But if you look at if you look at Western societies, or if you look at human nature in general, very few people are ever willing to stick their necks out. Everyone, or most people, are willing to follow a winner. Sticking your neck out is something different. There are social sanctions against this. There are economic sanctions against this. There are legal sanctions against this.
Right.
You don't find...
So you don't find people on the ground defending free speech because of that, right? That's the problem.
No, but I mean, that you don't want the people who feel strongly about this to be able to meet and commune with each other and thus strengthen their bonds.
Oh, I see. Okay. Yeah. All right.
Because one of the problems with internet activism is that you can look at the number of retweets or likes posts get, and you can see large numbers there, but there's a suspicion, and the suspicion is often correct, that these numbers don't mean very much, because what does it cost someone to click on a button?
Right. Or even do a podcast. Yes.
Well, yeah.
We have an intimate budget for that.
Yeah. But, I mean, getting people out of their houses, particularly these days, means something. That's why these Trump rallies were so significant to me. People don't even like to go to the movies anymore.
Yeah, but they were getting something new or something different, I guess. Re-engagement is what they were getting at the Trump rallies, right? They were strengthening the bonds with each other. Yeah, great.
They were strengthening the bonds with each other.
Right, okay.
And the left is determined not to allow this to happen. Because movements tend to become much more powerful when they become aware of the true amount of support that they have.
Right. People get confidence, courage. Yeah, confidence is the backbone of culture, right? Okay, I understand.
I mean, let me ask you a question. If, polls in the United States show that a majority of Americans are in favor of banning all Muslim immigration, why isn't this on the table?
Well, it's an illusion of democracy, right? I mean, it has to benefit the elite in order for it to happen. Now, that doesn't benefit the elite. That benefits the hoi polloi, or the people, because they maintain something of their culture then. It doesn't get overwhelmed by an alien force. However, we want the cheap labor, and, we want the culture to be atomized. So that benefits the elite. So
no, somehow... but I just if you look at the Trump rallies with their chanting of drain the swamp and build the wall, this had to strike terror in the hearts of the elite, because this was a group of people, well, let's say a majority, if you will, expressing their strength and their confidence.
Right, yeah.
And so there has to be a furious effort to prevent this from happening. We want people to go back to their smartphones where they can live in that prison of, how would I say, anonymous, pseudo-anonymous, virtual commitment.
Mm-hmm.
This is, you've heard me complain about talk radio. I used to be a talk radio producer, as you know, and I grew disillusioned early on with this whole business because it struck me as a pressure valve for the regime.
And you weren't being paid enough.
Well, there was that. But, this Rush Limbaugh wasn't organizing people to change. It's like that old joke from The Simpsons, from the DJ 3000. Those clowns in Congress have done it again.
Right. Yeah.
How does it keep up with the news like that?
Okay, so yeah, this atomization, sure, okay, you're overcoming it with the rallies. Yeah, fine.
Overcoming it with the rallies, and I think that we have to establish precedents, patterns. We have to establish routine. Sure. That is to say that people who are getting together to say things which are not illegal, and in the United States there's very little speech which is illegal, cannot be prevented from speaking.
Sure.
And just pressing and pressing and pressing and pressing until, as I say, it just becomes routine, as it used to be in the United States. And I'm afraid this is going to take people being assaulted with bicycle locks and the like.
Right.
Being subject
to provocation as well.
Being subject to the cowardly, coordinated conspiracies of the Antifas.
Mm-hmm.
And
but it's also going to take provocation. That's what I want to emphasize here. This accusation of provocation probably has some justification because you need the provocation there in order to bring the people out. The people that want a little action are going to go to Berkeley. They're not going to go to Ann Coulter speaking where she is not contested. That's all.
Well, Richard Spencer didn't get all that many people to hear him at Auburn, Alabama, did he?
I don't know. I didn't do a crowd count.
Well, it didn't seem like there were all that many people. I mean, Auburn's a university town, but it is in Mississippi. No, this idea of taking the fight into the enemy's camp is thrilling, but I think it is also the right thing. Because this is a war of demoralization that is going on here.
Right.
Our people have been demoralized for decades. Mm-hmm. Leading to this position, the black pill position that, let's just cultivate our garden. Now, if these people were just cultivating their garden, that would be one thing, but they insist on talking about politics, even as they say, directly or indirectly, well, there's really nothing that can be changed. If there's nothing that can be changed, then get out of politics. Lead, follow, or get out of the way.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And at this point, we would prefer that they lead or follow. But if that incurs some risk at this point, when people start talking about putting on helmets and face masks and shin guards, the uniform of the base stickman, that involves a lot of risk, physical risk.
It does, but, look at it as sort of a group fight club.
Yeah, well, that's why you got to depend on those young people, right? This is not a fight for old farts like me. I mean, I've lost my teeth already for that in those fights. So.
If you read about Base Stickman, some of these other people, these are sketchy characters. Mm-hmm. Some of them have criminal records. Well, so what?
Well, of course it's so what. Look at go back to our podcast with Dennis Dale getting arrested and the people that he was arrested with. These were the hardcores. This was the group that they're the ones who stick around for the arrests, the toughies, the toughs, the seasoned ones, right? That's what you need.
I mean, I find it rather odd that there hasn't been some sort of concerted movement by a district attorney somewhere in the United States to destroy the Antifa movement.
Mm-hmm.
Because the Antifa movement is nothing less than a criminal conspiracy. That's all it is.
Yeah, lapsing into terrorist territory now by phoning in threats to stop things. The next step, of course, is to follow through with the threat, which puts them into like Unabomber type territory, I suppose.
Well, no, I mean, in the same way that the United States government, well, and the government of Canada and Britain and everyone else has been revealed to be on the side of Al-Qaeda, it seems pretty clear to me that the elite and, most of the governments in North America are on the side of the Antifas.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, they are using them. Yeah, of course they are. Well, I would say that is the elites. Yeah, on that side. Some of them, most of them, anyway. They are the tools of the globalists. I think that quite a few people pointed that out in the recent round of essays on this topic. At least from the right. That these Antifas are the tools of the globalists. So that's all. But I mean, they've thoroughly absorbed the propaganda of the left that they're fighting the Nazis, that whoever they're going to meet at these Trump rallies are going to be emblazoned with swastika tattoos and stuff like this, so which actually did happen. Anyways, not a
well, there's always crazy people out there.
Right, yeah.
Well, it's as curious as to, what things happen in Canada. I just think false flag.
Yeah,
after the Heritage Front, I just think false flag, false flag, false flag. Stuart Bell of the National Post, the very interesting Stuart Bell, writes, far-right group Soldiers of Odin has splintered in Canada in dispute over racism. Yeah, the Soldiers of Odin.
Yeah.
Because there's just so many Odinists, so many Scandinavian pagans in Canada. And this is the right-wing group that we hear about over and over again. But of course, in no way could this be a government creation.
No.
In order to discredit a rising right wing. No. They wouldn't do that in Canada, except they've done it again and again and again.
Yeah, I know. It's fun for them to cover because, of course, they have that menace that the Heritage Front had. And the Soldiers of Odin, they're out there in the dark. Watch out, folks.
Yes, and they seem to wear hoodies or masks or something terrifying that. Yeah. I mean, masks, that's pretty terrifying, except when the Antifas wear them.
Yeah.
No, I mean, if you look at the Antifas... If you look at the Antifas, I mean, if you look at George Soros' involvement with this seems to be one solution or a partial solution to the growing NEET army, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. You have a bunch of young men, university educated, who, let's face it, they're not going to get decent jobs. And it's not because of their personalities or their lack of education or skills or whatever. It's just because our society doesn't create the kind of opportunity that it used to. And you have a dangerous situation with these young people because what does our educational system create? Well, it creates all of these millions of people who are essentially being educated to run the show, to be members of the elite. Yeah. But there's not very many of those jobs available, and they're jealously guarded. So George Soros hires a bunch of these people to do useful social things.
Like break stuff?
Well, to break stuff and to break people's heads.
Right, there you go.
Just so these normies don't get any ideas about what might be possible in a democratic society.
Yeah.
I mean, I really... people have spoken out against the absence of Trump from this Berkeley debate.
Right.
Well, I mean, the question of concrete steps that he could take, of course, every concrete step that he takes is found to be unconstitutional by some judge.
Right, some corrupt judge.
Yeah. But, if the governments aren't going to step up, then I guess it's down to the people. And I'm not glorying in this, I'm not relishing this, but it would seem to me that violence is inevitable. I think that we're going to see more violence because the elite and the elite's agencies, such as the police and the prosecutors and the politicians, are in the pockets of the globalists.
Well, that's a quote going back to Burnham, violence does solve things.
Well, violence does solve things. It is, as Marshall McLuhan told us, the quest for identity.
Yeah, okay. That's not really where I was going with that. I see violence being inevitable in the United States. I don't see it spreading necessarily. And, how much violence, I don't know. I mean, at a certain point, the police are going to take a lot of flack for allowing the violence to continue, especially if people start getting hurt. Well, what led to the situation where they had to hire a private security for Altamont? Well, it was a distrust of the police, wasn't there? They figured it'd be better to bring in these people, because, they weren't the pigs, right? And the audience would hate the pigs.
Well, I know it sounds strange, but back in 1969, the Hells Angels had countercultural cred.
Oh, okay. All right. So you're trying to destroy my point? Because they did hate the police. Yes, they had cred. Sure, they had cred, but the police also had a lack of cred. I mean, the longer this persists, I guess, or the more
I don't know.
less
Well,
cred the police get.
I did bring up Altamont. I could have brought up the Reform Party. Now, the Heritage Front was involved in this business with the Reform Party, where they were attempting to infiltrate the Reform Party in order to spread the idea that the Reform Party were Nazis.
Right, yeah.
And Heritage people associated with the Heritage Front were offering their services as bodyguards in the early days of the Reform Party. And this was a Government of Canada-led campaign to destroy a legitimate political movement, the Reform Party, which eventually became the official opposition. This is how it's done, Americans.
Yeah, okay? I know, but we've already set up the trap, though. I mean, we said, I guess the way to go is go with private security. Well, they go with the private security because you don't trust the police. And,
private security is very, very expensive. I mean, if you have a bunch of Antifas on their own time or on George Soros's time, the amount of security that's necessary for large numbers of people to commune peaceably, well, that would be prohibitive. It seemed to me that you're going to have these groups, security groups, rising up from the organizations themselves rather than being brought in from outside. Because if they're brought in from outside, then they're going to be suborned, or there's going to be attempts to suborn them.
Mm-hmm. Hi, Kevin Steele here again with another podcast footnote. What you've just heard then is a cat. Where my co-host Kevin Grace is now living, there's apparently a cat. Not his. It belongs to someone else in the building. And this cat has taken a real liking to Grace, probably because it's left alone all day and Grace is the only one there. And as regular listeners know, Grace likes cats. Usually I edit stuff like this out of the podcast, but I thought, hey, just this once I'll leave it in. For those of you who don't find humor in this kind of thing, well, too bad. Remember that YouTube video where the toddlers marched into their dad's home office while he was being interviewed on Skype from Korea, and everybody thought that the Korean woman who crawled in to drag the kids out was the nanny, but she turned out to be his wife, and shame on all of us for thinking she was the nanny because racism and reasons? Well, anyways, it was really cute, and there was a politically correct lesson there for us all. But mostly it was cute. So that's why I'm leaving the cat in, because it's cute. And there's a lesson here too. That is that I really do a lot of work editing these podcasts. So there's that, bigots. But mostly it's cute. Anyway, back to the show. Somehow I just get the feeling this is all going to end up back to the militia movement.
Hang on just a minute, okay?
Sure.
You, here. Okay, belt up. Okay, happy now? Sorry about that. Well, if the police are not going to perform their duty, the prosecutors are not going to perform their duty, then I suppose citizens will have to cover these functions themselves. I don't see any other way around it.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Now, the advantage that the United States has over Canada in this regard is that there is a will that exists in the United States that does not exist in Canada. There is still a viable opposition.
Don't worry about it.
there is still a viable opposition to the elite hegemony that doesn't exist here.
Mm-hmm.
But protect it while you've still got it would be my message. That there's no question what the end game is here. The end game on the legal side, on the social... Are you done?
Audience, this is the cat that is terrorizing Kevin Michael Grace. He's now part of the program.
So, what was I saying?
I don't know. Something about, are you done?
No. I thought if I let the cat in, then it would stop pawing at the door and making the piteous noises. Sit down. Go to sleep. Sorry.
Yeah, there you go.
Now, what was I saying?
Oh, hell, I don't know. I was thinking about the cat. No.
I don't. You see, in another household, we could put the cat outside, but that's not going to work here.
Sure. You were saying something to the effect of, people stepping up to do it themselves, that kind of thing. That's in the absence of police, blah, blah, blah.
Oh, well, what I was saying, this question of will.
Right.
That there still exists in the United States.
Yeah.
There still exists in the United States a will to resist elite hegemony.
Mm-hmm.
And my message to Americans is cherish it, protect it, claim it back, make it whole again while you still can. Because Canada's the result of the end game. The end game in Canada is that essentially you don't have any resistance and people don't even think about resistance.
Right, yeah. So they're working for the impoverishment of the middle class. That's what they can accomplish. And in Canada, there is still resistance from the middle class in the United States.
Well, yes, and what we see is a multi-pronged assault on free assembly. That the courts would shut it down if they could. Now, Trump won, so that's not on the agenda, not at the Supreme Court level at any rate. And I suspect that there is going to be a showdown between Trump and the courts. We can talk about that at another time. But we have this other effort going on, this George Soros funded, at least in part, Antifa, bully boy movement to terrorize people into abandoning freedom of assembly.
Why aren't they going after Soros? Orban in Hungary has been warning us about this guy. Can't they do anything about him? Don't they want to do anything about him? Is he useful to them?
Orban is shutting down his university. Do you know who the rector of his deep state university is in Hungary?
No, I don't, actually.
Michael Ignatieff. Remember him?
Seriously? Really?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
there's
of course, he's giving Jared Kushner a loan, so...
Oh, there's Canadians all over the place. Anna Porter, speaking out against this bad Orban. And also Chivivia Hozek. A big deal in the Liberal Party also involved here. This is Canadian fingerprints all over this.
I suspect Louise Arbour's going to be mouthing off soon.
Yeah. No. No, just to wrap up here, this is a turning point in American history where it's simply become clear that the rights that Americans have taken for granted are on the verge of disappearing. So act now or forever hold your peace. Yeah. Because you'll be forced to forever hold your peace.
But you'll be contented like Canadians. Yeah, I don't know. Seems to me that that's slowly being drained. Not just the resistance, but the wealth of Canada is slowly being drained.
Oh, we'll talk about Canada another time. I mean, all systems continue till they stop, as Herbert Stein said, and we're getting close.
Right. Yeah. So.
Well, let's just see whether the NDP wins in British Columbia. Then maybe we'll have a situation where all 10 of Canada's provinces are have-not provinces. That'll be fun.
Mm-hmm. Yes, Canada is the Jacob Marley to the American Scrooge. Come with a warning.
And on that bombshell, as Alan Partridge would say.
Oh, isn't that what I'm supposed to say? Okay.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
we're going to wrap up episode 80 of Grace and Steel. Episode 80 of Grace and Steel was sponsored by Pepe Reads, an alt-right patriotic book club, which will meet monthly in downtown Vancouver. Those interested in taking part are invited to contact the organizer at pepereads@protonmail.com. Thanks very much for listening. I'm Kevin Steele.
And I'm Kevin Michael Grace.